Thank you for this welcome. It means a great deal to me. It means a great deal to me to be here. My oldest, dearest childhood friend, whom I knew from the age of 8 until she died in our 40s, our early 40s, Ellen Carter Spears, graduated from Wellesley in 1951. While I was attending Radcliffe, she was here at Wellesley. And I was sitting in the corner of the music library thinking about her. She was someone who knew she was gay very early in life, and who, with great courage, lived her life, which was all too brief, and who had a wonderful early ethical sense, which as a young girl, as a child even, I felt in her, although I couldn't have named that. And I think of her often. She's very much still with me, but I certainly have been thinking about her here. So I dedicate this reading to her. This is called Through Corralitos Under Rolls of Cloud. Corralitos is a small rural community near where I live on the central coast of California, and it's mostly apple orchards, and in places the apple orchards are giving way to vineyards. It's very beautiful. And I drive through there every so often when I want to commune with the scenery. Through Corralitos under rolls of cloud. Through Corralitos under rolls of cloud, between winter-stiff ranged apple trees, each netted in transparent air, thin sinking light, heart-sick within, and filmed in heart-sickness around you, gelatin cocoon, invisible yet impervious, to the hawk steering against the cloud bank, to the clear oranges burning at the rancher's gate, rose tree, agave, stiff beauties holding fast with or without your passion, the pruners freeing up the boughs, in the unsearched faith these strange stiff shapes will bear. Showering after flu, stripping the bed, running the shrouds of sickness through the wash, airing the rooms, emptying the trash. It's as if part of you had died in the house sometime in that last low-lit afternoon when your dreams ebbed salt-thick into the sheets, and now this other's left to wash the corpse, burn eucalyptus, turn the mirrors over. This other, who herself barely came back, whose breath was fog to your mist, whose stubborn shadow covered you as you lay freezing. She survived, uncertain who she is or will be without you. If you know who died on that bed, do you know who has survived? If you say, she was weaker, held life less dear, expected others to fight for her, if pride lets you name her victim, and the one who got up and threw the windows open, stripped the bed, survivor, what have you said, what do you know of the survivor when you know her only in opposition to the lost? What does it mean to say, I have survived, until you take the mirrors and turn them outward and read your own face in their outraged light? That light of outrage is the light of history, springing upon us when we're least prepared, thinking maybe a little glade of time, leaf thick and with clear water, is ours, is promised us, for all we've hacked and tracked our way through to this. What will it be? Your wish or mine? Your prayers or my wish then? That those we love be well, whatever that means, to be well. Outrage, who dare claim protection for their own amid such unprotection. What kind of prayer is that? To what kind of God? What kind of wish? She who died on that bed sees it her way. She who went under peers through the translucent shell, cupping her death, and sees her other well, through a long lens in silvered outline, well, she sees her other, and she cannot tell why, when the boom of surf struck at them both, she felt the undertow and heard the bell, thought death would be their twinning, till the swell smashed her against the reef, her other still fighting the pull, struggling somewhere away, further and further, calling her all the while. She who went under summons her other still. The French Jewish philosopher Simone Weil once wrote, "The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say to him, 'What are you going through?'" This is called For a Friend in Travail, and it begins with a dream. Waking from violence, the surgeon's probe left in the foot, paralyzing the body from the waist down. Dark before dawn, wrapped in a shawl to walk the house, the drinking gourd slung in the northwest, half slice of moon to the south through dark panes. A time to speak to you. What are you going through, she said, is the great question. Philosopher of oppression, theorist of the victories of force. We write from the marrow of our bones what she did not ask or tell, how victims save their own lives. That crawl along the ledge, then the raveling span of fibers strung from one side to the other. I've dreamed that too. Waking, not sure we made it. Relief, appallment of waking. Consciousness, oh no, to sleep again. Oh, to sleep without dreaming. How day breaks when it breaks. How clear and light the moon melting into moon-colored air, moist and sweet here on the western edge. Love for the world, and we a part of it. How the poppies break from their sealed envelopes, she did not tell. What are you going through there on the other edge? This is called What Kind of Times Are These? And the title is from a poem by the great German communist playwright and poet Bertolt Brecht. And he was writing in the period just before the Nazis came in, before Hitler was elected, as he was. And he said in a poem, what kind of times are these when it feels like almost a crime to talk about trees, because it means keeping silent about so many evil deeds? What kind of times are these? There's a place between two stands of trees where the grass grows uphill, and the old revolutionary road breaks off into shadows, near a meeting house abandoned by the persecuted who disappeared into those shadows. I've walked there picking mushrooms at the edge of dread, but don't be fooled. This isn't a Russian poem. This is not somewhere else but here. Our country moving closer to its own truth and dread, its own ways of making people disappear. I won't tell you where the place is, the dark mesh of the woods, meeting the unmarked strip of light, ghost-ridden crossroads, leaf mold paradise. I know already who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. And I won't tell you where it is, so why do I tell you anything? Because you still listen, because in times like these, to have you listen at all, it's necessary to talk about trees. In those years, people will say, we lost track of the meaning of we, of you. We found ourselves reduced to I, and the whole thing became silly, ironic, terrible. We were trying to live a personal life, and yes, that was the only life we could bear witness to. But the great dark birds of history screamed and plunged into our personal weather. They were headed somewhere else, but their beaks and pinions drove along the shore, through the rags of fog, where we stood, saying, I. Miracle Ice Cream. That's the name of a little vendor truck that goes along the street where I live. Miracle's truck comes down the little avenue, Scott Joplin ragtime strewn behind it like pearls. And yes, you can feel happy with one piece of your heart. Take what's still given. In a room's rich shadow, a woman's breasts swinging lightly as she bends. Early now, the pearl of dusk dissolves. Late, you sit weighing the evening news, fast food miracles, ghostly revolutions, the rest of your heart. I was driving in northern New Mexico some years ago and in the mountains and passed a little road with a sign that said Calle Vision, Vision Road. And I thought about turning back and following and finding where it led. And then I decided, no, I will imagine where it leads. And that's the name of this poem, Calle Vision. There are several things in it that I will gloss for you before you listen. I had an MRI scan around that time, and there's a questionnaire you had to fill out, and one of the questions, they ask you if you're claustrophobic and things like that. And then there was this question, have you ever worked around metal? Are there particles under your skin? And that was a whole cause for thought. And then I quote in this poem from the great jazz singer Abby Lincoln, a song called The World is Falling Down. It's on her album of the same name. And I quote from the 17th century English prose writer Sir Thomas Browne, who wrote a book called The Religio Medici, A Doctor's Religion. And in it he says, I think of the world not as a place to live in, but a place to die in, not an inn, but a hospital. And I also drew in this poem on an account of a deadly fire in a chicken processing factory in North Carolina, which, as with the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which is a much more famous historical event, the factory owners had locked the doors, and when the fire broke out, people couldn't escape. And again, this was a female workforce. Calle Vision. Not what you thought, just a turnoff, leading downhill, not up. Narrow, doesn't waste itself, has a house at the far end, scrub oak and cactus in the yard, some cats, some snakes. In the house there is a room. In the room there is a bed. On the bed there is a blanket that tells the coming of the railroad. Under the blanket there are sheets, scrubbed transparent here and there. Under the sheets there's a mattress, the old rough kind with buttons and ticking. Under the mattress is a frame of rusting iron, still strong. The whole bed smells of soap and rust. The window smells of old tobacco dust and rain. This is your room in Calle Vision. If you took the turnoff, it was for you. Calle Vision, sand in your teeth, granules of cartilage in your wrists. Calle Vision, firestorm behind shuttered eyelids, fire in your foot. Calle Vision, rocking the gates of your locked bones. Calle Vision, dream net dropped over your porous sleep. Lodged in the difficult hotel, all help withheld, a place not to live but to die in, not an inn but a hospital. A friend's love came to me, touched and took me away in a car, love of a curmudgeon, a short fuse. And as he drove, eyes on the road, I felt his love. And that was simply the case, the way things were, unstated and apparent, and like the rest of it, clear as a dream. Calle Vision, your heart beats on unbroken. How is this possible? Calle Vision, wounded knee, wounded spine, wounded eye. Have you ever worked around metal? Are there particles under your skin? Calle Vision, but your heart is still whole. How is this possible? Since what can be will be taken, when not offered in trust and faith, by the collectors of collectibles, the professors of what has been suffered. The world is falling down. Hold my hand. It's a lonely sound. Hold my hand. Calle Vision. Never forget the body's pain. Never divide it. Ammonia, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, hydrogen sulfide, the gases that rise from urine and feces in the pig confinement units known as nurseries, can eat a metal doorknob off in half a year. Pig dander, drust from dry manure, lung scar, breath shortedness an early symptom. And the fire shall try every man's work, Calle Vision, and every woman's. If you took the turn off, this is your revelation, this the source. The repetitive motions of slaughtering, fire in wrists, in elbows, the dead birds coming at you along the line, how you smell them in your sleep, fire in your wrist, blood packed under your fingernails, heavy air, doors padlocked on the outside, you might steal a chicken, fire in the chicken factory, fire in the carpal tunnel, leaping the frying vats, yellow smoke from soybean oil and wasted parts and insulating wire, some fleeing to the freezer, some found stuck in poses of escape. You can call on beauty still, and it will leap from all directions. You can write beauty into the cruel file of things done, things left undone, but once we were dissimilar yet unseparate. That's beauty. That's what you catch in the newborn's midnight gaze, the fog that melts the falling stars, the virus from the smashed lianas driven, searching now for us. In the room, in the house, in Calle Visión, all you want is to lie down alone on your back, let your hands slide lightly over your hip bones. But she's there, with her remnants, her cross-sections, trying to distract you with her childhood, her recipes, her cargo of charred pages, her carved and freckled neck stones, her crying out for witness, her backward-forward timescapes, her suitcase in Berlin, and the one lost and found in her island go and come. Is she terrified you will forget her? In the black net of her orange wing, the angry night-blown butterfly hangs on a piece of lilac in the sun, carried overland like her from a long way off. She has traveled hard and far, and her interrogation goes, hands dripping with wet earth, head full of shocking dreams. Oh, what have you buried all these years? What have you dug up? This place is alive with the dead and with the living. I have never been alone here. I wear my triple eye as I walk along the road. Past, present, future, all are at my side. Storm-beaten, tough-winged passenger, there is nothing I have buried that can die. On the road there is a house, scrub oak and cactus in the yard, lilac carried overland from a long way off. In the house there is a bed. On the bed there is a blanket, telling the coming of the railroad. Under the mattress there's a frame of rusting iron, still strong. The window smells of old tobacco dust and rain. The window smells of old tobacco dust and rain. I was at a film festival at one point. I was talking this afternoon about, someone asked me about arts that have influenced my work, and I said certainly film, and this is a poem that was very powerfully affected and really generated by seeing a film by a director called Nina Menkes, and it's called The Great Sadness of Zohara, and it's almost without dialogue. The soundtrack is quite amazing, but there's very little dialogue. And it begins with a woman in the Orthodox, ultra-religious quarter of Jerusalem, and she's leaving, and she goes on a journey, and she goes into, it's not specified, but it might be Palestine, it might be some Arab country, and then she returns. That's the circle of the film. And some of the images in this poem come from that film, and the movement of the poem comes from that film. It's called Reversion. This woman, the heart of the matter. This woman flung into solitary by the prayers of her tribe. This woman waking, reaching for scissors, starting to cut her hair. Hair, long shaven, growing out. To snip, to snip, to snip, creak of sharpness meeting itself against the roughness of her hair. This woman whose voices drive her into exile. exile, exile. Drive her toward the other side, by train and foot and ship to the other side of a narrow sea. This woman, the heart of the matter, heart of the law, heart of the prophets, their voices buzzing like rasp saws in her brain, taking ship without a passport. How does she do it? Even the ships have eyes, are painted like birds. This woman has no address book. This woman perhaps has a toothbrush. Somewhere dealing for red, blue dyes to crest her rough-clipped hair. On the other side, stranger to women and to children, setting her bare foot sole in the print of the stranger's bare foot in the sand, feeding the stranger's dog from the sack of her exhaustion, hearing the male prayers of the stranger's tribe, rustle of the stranger's river, lying down asleep and dreamless in one of their doorways. She has long shed the coverings. On the other side she walks bare-armed, bare-legged, clothed in voices. Here or there picks up a scarf, a remnant. Day breaks cold on her legs and in her sexual hair, her punk hair, her religious hair. Passing the blue rectangles of the stranger's doors, not one opens to her. Threading herself into declining alleys, black on white plaster, olive on violet. To walk, to walk, to walk. To lie on a warm stone, listening to familiar insects. Exile, exile. This woman, the heart of the matter, circling back to the city where her name crackles behind creviced stones. This woman who left alone and returns alone, whose hair again is covered, whose arms and neck are covered according to the law. Underneath, her skin has darkened, her foot soles roughened, sand from the stranger's doorway, sifting from her plastic carry-all, drifting into the sand, whirling around in her old quarter. This poem is an homage to the French poet René Char, a remarkable figure. He was a great poet. He briefly was a member of the Surrealist movement, and then he quit it. And he was married to a Jewish woman, and when the Nazis invaded France, and he also was a communist, when the Nazis invaded France, they went underground, and he became a commander in the French resistance and was literally in the field, because the French resistance was largely a guerrilla movement, living outdoors, hiding often among the reeds called the maquis. They were known as maquisards, and he was a commander of many young men, and while he was thus engaged, he kept a journal which has been translated and published in English under the title Leaves of Hypnos. His code name in the resistance was Hypnos, who was the god of sleep. And This is an extraordinary journal because it's a poet's journal, but it's also the journal of an activist, a man engaged in very serious decision-making, leading a group of people who were at constant risk. And he writes about all of that in the journal. They are very short, mostly very short entries. And I quote from that journal in this poem. And there's also a line from the poet André Breton, who was the sort of inventor and leader of the Surrealist movement, who said at one point, the simplest surreal act is to go down in the street with a revolver and fire around at random, which we might not think today is so surreal, unfortunately. Shar. There is bracken, there is the dark mulberry, there is the village where no villager survived. There are the Hitlerians, there are the foresters, feeding the partisans from frugal larders. There is the moon ablaze in every quarter. There is the moon of tin and sage, and unseen pilots dropping explosive gifts into meadows of fog and crickets. There is the cuckoo and the tiny snake. There is the table set at every meal for freedom whose chair stays vacant. The young men in their newfound passions love along with them the ones they love. Obscurity, code, the invisible existence of a thrush in the reeds, the poet watching as the blood washes off the revolver in the bucket. Redbreast, your song shakes loose a ruin of memories. A horrible day. Perhaps he knew at that final instant. The village had to be spared at any price. How can you hear me? I speak from so far. The flowering broom hid us in a blazing yellow mist. And this is a prose passage from the journal. This war will prolong itself beyond any platonic armistice. The implanting of political concepts will go on amid upheavals and under cover of self-confident hypocrisy. Don't smile. Thrust aside both skepticism and resignation, and prepare your soul to face an intramural confrontation with demons as cold-blooded as microbes. The poet in wartime, the surrealist's younger brother turned realist. The village had to be spared at any price. All eyes on him in the woods crammed with maquisards, expecting him to signal to fire and save their comrade, shook his head and watched Bernard's execution, knowing that the random shooting of a revolver may be the simplest surreal act, but never changes the balance of power, and that real acts are not simple. The poet, prone to exaggerate, thinks clearly under torture. Knowing the end of the war would mean no end to the microbes frozen in each soul. The young freedom fighters in love with the resistance, fed by a thrill for violence, familiar as his own jaw under the razor. Insoluble river-rain conscience, echo of the future, I keep vigil for you here by the reeds of Elkhorn Slough and the brown mouth of the Salinas River going green, where the white egret fishes the fragile margins. Hermetic guide in resistance, I've found you and lost you several times in my life. You were never just the poet appalled and transfixed by war. You were the maker of terrible, delicate decisions, and that did not smudge your sense of limits. You saw squirrels crashing from the tops of burning pines when the canister exploded, and worse, and you were in charge of every risk. The incendiary motives of others were in your charge, and the need for a courage wrapped in absolute tact. And you decided and lived like that, and you held poetry at your lips, a piece of wild thyme ripped from a burning meadow, a mimosa twig from still unravaged country. You kept your senses about you like that, And like this, I keep vigil for you. This is called Fox. I needed Fox. Badly, I needed a vixen for the long time none had come near me. I needed recognition from a triangulated face, burnt yellow eyes, fronting the long body, the fierce and sacrificial tail. I needed history of Fox, briars of legend it was said she had run through. I was in want of Fox. And the truth of briars she had to have run through, I craved to feel on her pelt. If my hands could even slide past, or her body slide between them, sharp truth, distressing surfaces of fur, lacerated skin calling legend to account, a vixen's courage in vixen terms. For a human animal to call for help on another animal is the most riven, the most revolted cry on earth. Come a long way down, go back far enough. It means tearing and torn, endless and sudden. Back far enough, it blurts into the birth yell of the yet-to-be human child, pushed out of a female, the yet-to-be woman. This is called Victory, and I wrote it for a younger poet, wonderful poet, Tory Dent, who has for some years now been struggling with HIV and has written extraordinary poetry about this facing of early death. And she has two books. One is called HIV Mon Amour, and one is called What Silence Equals. And the name of the poem is Victory. There's an allusion in it to a poem by Paul Celan called Todesfuge, Death Fugue, in which he says, Der Tod ist ein Meister aus Deutschland. Death is a German master. It's a poem about the Holocaust. Victory. Something spreading underground won't speak to us. Under skin won't declare itself. Not all life forms want dialogue with the machine gods in their drama, hogging down the deep bush, clear-cutting refugees from ancient or transient villages into our opportunistic fervor to search crazily for a host, a lifeboat. Suddenly, instead of art, we're eyeing organisms traced and stained on cathedral transparencies, cruel blues, embroidered purples, succinct yellows, a beautiful tumor. I guess you're not alone. I fear you're alone. There's, of course, poetry, awful bridge rising over naked air. I first took it as just a continuation of the road, a masterpiece of engineering, praised, etc. Then, on the radio, incline too steep for ease of, etc. Drove it nonetheless because I had to, this being how, so this is how I find you, alive and more. As if, how many conditionals must we suffer? I'm driving to your side, an intimate collusion, packed in the trunk my bag of foils for fencing with pain, glasses of varying spectrum for sun or fog or sun-struck rain or bitterest night, my sack of hidden poetries, old glue shredding from their spines, my time exposure of the Leonids over Joshua Tree, as if we're going to win this, oh, because. If you have a sister, I am not she, nor your mother, nor you my daughter, nor are we lovers or any kind of couple, except in the intensive care of poetry and death's master plan, architecture in progress, draft elevations of a black and white mosaic dome, the master left on your doorstep, with a white card in black calligraphy, make what you will of this, as if leaving purple roses. If, how many conditionals must we suffer? I tell you, a letter from the master is lying on my own doorstep, glued there with leaves and rain, and I haven't bent to it yet. If I tell you I surmise, he writes differently to me. Do as you will, you have had your life, many have not. Signing it in his olden script, Meister aus Deutschland. In coldest Europe, end of that war, frozen domes, iron railings frozen, stoves lit in the streets, memory banks of cold. The Nike of Samothrace, on a staircase, wings in blazing backdraft, said to me, to everyone she met, displaced, amputated, never discount me. Victory, indented in disaster, striding at the head of stairs. And this is another homage. I suppose all poetry is in a way an homage to whatever makes it possible. At any rate, mine is. It's called For This, and I wrote it thinking of the artists of every kind, and especially the poets whose work I've turned to in times of my own emptiness, need, disorientation, despair. If I've reached for your lines, I have, like letters from the dead that stir the nerves, doused you for a springhead to water my thirst, dug into my compost skeletons and petals you surely meant to catch the light. At work in my worm-eaten, wormwood-raftered, stateless underground, have I a plea. If I've touched your finger with a ravenous tongue, licked from your palm a rift of salt, if I've dreamt or thought you, a pack of blood, fresh drawn, hanging dark red from a hook higher than my heart, you who understand transfusion, where else should I appeal? A pilot light lies low while the gas jets sleep. A cat getting towed from stove into nocturnal ice. Language uncommon and agile as truth melts down the most intractable silence. A lighthouse keeper's ethics. You tend for all or none. For this you might set your furniture on fire. Of this we have blundered over, as if the lamp could be shut off at will, rescue denied for some, and still a lighthouse be. I'm just going to read a couple of new poems from a book that I hope is coming out next year. This is called Equinox. I was in the Middle West on September 11th, 2001, and it took me a while to get home. And when I got home, I found this poem in my computer. Time split like a fruit between dark and light, and a usual fog drags over this landfall. I've walked September end to end, barefoot room to room, carrying in hand a knife well honed for cutting stem or root or wick, eyes open to abalone shells, memorial candle flames, split lemons, roses laid along charring logs, gorgeous things, dull acres of developed land as we had named it, nowhere, wetland, burnt garbage looming at its heart, gunmetal thicket, midnight blue blood and tricking masks. I thought I knew history was not a novel. So can I say it was not I, listed as innocence, betrayed you, serving and protesting always the motives of my government, thinking we'd scratch out a place where poetry, old subversive shape, grew out of nowhere, here, where skin could lie on skin, a place outside the limits. Can say I was mistaken. To be so bruised, in the soft organs, skeins of consciousness, over and over have let it be damage to others, crushing of the animate core, that tone-deaf, cut-loose ego swarming the world, so bruised, heart, spleen, long inflamed ribbons of the guts, the spine's vertical necklace swaying. Have let it swarm through us, let it happen as it must, inmost. But before this, long before this, those other eyes frontally exposed themselves and spoke. This is called Transparencies. There's sort of been an ongoing argument in literary theory and among some poets as to whether language is transparent or not. Meaning that do words have a meaning at all? Can we ever understand each other? I won't go into that. But this is called Transparencies, and it is about language. That the meek word, like the righteous word, can bully. That an Israeli soldier interviewed years after the first Intifada could mourn on camera what under orders he did, saw done, did not refuse. That another, leaving Beit Yala, could scrawl on a wall, "We are truly sorry for the mess we made," is merely routine, word that would cancel deed. That human equals innocent and guilty, that we grasp for innocence whether or no, is elementary. That words can translate into broken bones, that the power to hurl words is a weapon, that the body can be a weapon any child on playground knows, that asked your favorite word in a game, you always named a thing, a quality, freedom or river, never a pronoun, never God or war, is taken for granted. That word and body are all we have to lay on the line. That words are window panes in a ransacked hut smeared by time's dirty rains, we might argue. Likewise, that words are clear as glass till the sun strikes it blinding. But that in a dark window pane you have seen your face, that when you wipe your glasses, the text grows clearer, that the sound of crunching glass comes at the height of the wedding, that I can look through glass into my neighbor's house, but not my neighbor's life, that glass is sometimes broken to save lives, that a word can be crushed like a goblet underfoot, is only what it seems, part question, part answer, how you live it. And this last is called Tendril. Why does the outstretched finger of home probe the dark hotel room like a flashlight beam on the traveler, half-packed, sitting on the bed, face in hands, wishing her bag emptied again at home? Why does the young security guard pray to keep standing watch forever, never to fly? Why does he wish he were boarding as the passengers file past him into the plane? What are they carrying in their bundles? What vanities, superstitions, little talismans? What have the authorities intercepted? Who will get to keep it? Oh, I'll just tell you that a gecko is a small lizard. That's the one gloss for this poem. Half asleep in the dimmed cabin, she configures a gecko, aslant the overhead bin, tendrils of vine curling up through the cabin floor, buried here in night as in a valley remote from rescue. Unfound, confounded, vain, superstitious, whatever we were before, now we are still, outstretched, curled, however we were. Unwatched the gecko, the inching of green through the cracks in the fused, imperious shell. Dreaming a womb's languor valleyed in death among fellow strangers, she has merely slept through the night. A nose nearby rasps. Everyone, in fact, is breathing. The gecko has dashed into some crevice of her brain. The tendrils retract. Orange juice is passed on trays. Declarations filled out in the sudden dawn. She can't go on dreaming of mass death. This was not to have been her métier. She says to the mirror in the toilet, a bad light any way you judge yourself. And she's judge, prosecutor, witness, perpetrator of her time's conspiracies, of the ignorant with the ruthless. She's the one she's looking at. This confessional reeks of sweet antiseptic, and besides, she's not confessing. Her mind balks, craving wild onions, nostril chill of eucalyptus, that seventh sense of what's missing against what's supplied. She walks at 30,000 feet into the cabin, sunrise crashing through the windows. Cut the harping, she tells herself. You're human, porous, like all the rest. She was to have sat in a vaulted library, heavy scrolls wheeled to a desk, for sieving, sifting, translating all morning, then a quick lunch, thick coffee, then light descending slowly on earthen-colored texts. But that's a dream of dust. Frail are thy tents, humanity, facing thy monologues of force. She must have fallen asleep reading. She must have fallen asleep reading. The woman who mopped the tiles is deliquescent, a scarlet gel. Her ligaments and lungs, her wrought brain, her belly's pulse, disrupt among others mangled there. The chief librarian, the beggar, the man with the list of questions, the scrolls never to be translated, and the man who wheeled the scrolls. She had wanted to find meaning in the past, but the future drove a vagrant tank, a rogue bulldozer, rearranging the past in a blip, coherence smashed into vestige. Not for her even the thought of her children's children picking up a shard of tile, then another, laying blue against green, seeing words in 3 scripts flowing through vines and flowers, guessing at what it was, the Levantine debris. Not for her, but still for someone. Thank you. Thank you very much.